Good morning. Good morning, Sono. Good morning. We have the Speaker of the Maldives Parliament. We have the Vice President. We have ministers, MPs, and of course we have all of you beautiful people who've shown an interest in what we are trying to do here in the Maldives and have taken the time and have come here. Richard, thank you very much for coming. And I also see a number of faces who I've seen here from last year. It is indeed developing and building to be a nice little event that we are able to have every year. And thank you very much for Sonu to maintaining it and sustaining it, and see how I'm sure during the course of this symposium we will be able to define ourselves more clearly on how we may go forward with the future symposiums. On the issue of climate change, it's really simple and it's sorted. If we exceed more than 350 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, we are going to die. And the science is clear and it's sorted, and I really don't think that there is any debate that we require any further on the certainty of the subject. UNFCCC, who has been at it for the last 20 years in trying to find an agreement among states, is not still able to come out with a clear understanding among member countries. And I really don't see them being able to do it in the near future either. And again, also the manner in which they are going about it is an attempt to find the lowest common denominator in an agreement, which is if two countries agree on a certain thing, and if a third country comes along, you again dilute your first initial understanding to accommodate the third country. So at the end of the day, even if they do come up with an agreement, that would be an agreement about nothing. So I hope that the UNFCCC process as well, and the United Nations as well, find new thinking, find other ways and means of how countries may be able to have conversations on the subject. In negotiations, the world is divided, and it's really a whole lot of bickering that goes on in the international fora. There's on the one hand the countries that we call the rich countries. Surprisingly, the leader of these groups is the most debted country, the United States. These are the rich countries. And the poor countries, apparently the leader of that group, that is the biggest investor in the world, which is the People's Republic of China. So there is even confusion among themselves in trying to define themselves. Are we poor or are we rich? Now for us it's very, very clear. Even if you are rich or either you are poor, it doesn't really matter. The amount of carbon emission to the atmosphere is going to kill us. So even if the developed world goes to sleep tomorrow and does nothing for the next 100 years, and if the developing countries go business as usual, we are still going to die. So I feel that this bickering and squabbling about who should reduce emission, who should cut it, and how much is really, really quite silly. And I hope that countries come to understand the absurdity of it all and then actually try to do something real. For the past 20 years, the UN and all the negotiations have been trying to get countries to reduce their emissions. Now, carbon emission has become sacred in many senses because that has been equated to development. Very often we find leaders suggesting that capping carbon emissions or reducing carbon emission would amount to poverty or would amount to reduction in their growth and development. Now, we are now increasingly seeing that this really is not true at all. We can find a low carbon development projection, a development procedure or a path that where we still end up with getting the same things but through better technology and renewable energy. We have already countries that have done it. And I always think that in the 1970s, Iceland was still a developing country. But they've, of course, found a whole lot of renewable energy, and they've been able to trade that and become a developed country through renewable energy. And if we try to map the situations and the conditions and the measures that Iceland took in their path to development through less carbon sources of energy, I'm sure we will be able to find solutions and find ways of doing this. In my mind, a low carbon growth projection trajectory is possible, and I think we should be going forward with it. Why I say this is because daytime electricity production cost, diesel production cost in the Maldives is 40 cents. And even the highest renewable energy production cost is now 30 cents. So there's really no reason at all other than a gap in investments, initial investments, that we can just more than 80% of our carbon emissions or our energy production can become renewable in the very, very foreseeable future, and it is financially and economically viable. We have very often taken climate change to be an earth science issue, but I think if we are to address this and find solutions, we need to look at it in other dimensions as well. For me, it's an economic issue, it's a development issue, it's a security issue, it's a safety issue. It's not necessarily just a science or an environment issue. We need to become carbon neutral even if there was no climate change, simply because this is more economically viable. We have all these resources, we have the sun, but we don't have fossil fuel. And we import, for energy use, we use more than 14% of our GDP as for renewable energy, for fossil fuel energy, and that's actually less than our education and health budget combined. So we need to find solutions fairly rapidly, and I think renewable energy and the interest that everyone is now maintaining and showing in this new technology is really a blessing for the Maldives. We are trying to become carbon neutral not because we think we can save the world by Maldives becoming carbon neutral. No, we emit nothing almost compared to other countries. But we feel that if we can demonstrate a low carbon development strategy that can be understood and examined and copied elsewhere, then it would be a step in the right direction. Countries might be very big sometimes, but it all starts with an individual, with a family, with a household, with a town, with a village, with a city, and with huge, huge cities. But initially, it's always an individual, and it's always a family or a house. So what we are trying to find are solutions for homes, solutions for families. Now, if we are able to find family solutions, carbon neutral family solutions in their consumption methods or in their consumption levels, then I'm sure this can be mapped elsewhere. I'm sure we should be able to find other innovative ways of having carbon conversations or climate change conversations with other governments. The UNFCCC process has very much stressed on carbon reduction, and that's very, very difficult for many, many leaders. We love to open powerhouses and cut ribbons and clap and shake hands. That's why a politician's life is clapping, shaking hands, and cutting ribbons. And it's very difficult. I'm sure it will be very difficult for a number of leaders when the United Nations come up to them and say not to cut ribbons, not to clap hands, and not to shake hands. Basically, you get most amount of claps when you open a power plant because it is providing electricity and it is providing a life to a number of rural islands and countries. So when the UN comes up and tells us, or rather political leaders, I'm trying to distance myself from them, as if, you know, but when they come up and tell leaders, we tend to be very skeptical about it. It's a devious plan to get us out of power. It's an opposition plan, in fact. So it becomes very difficult. But what we feel is, if we start asking countries to start producing renewable energy or commit themselves to a certain amount of their income or their GDP to invest in renewable energy, that would amount to asking the politicians to start opening new power plants and more power plants, but greener power plants. And I just feel that this way we will all be at it, wanting to open more power plants. And if we can make renewable energy, or rather ask countries to produce more energy, but renewable energy, instead of asking them to reduce production of fossil fuel. I think if we start our negotiations on these lines, India or any developing country, if they agree to a certain amount of their income to be invested in renewable energy, we know how much electricity that is, we know how much carbon reduction that is, and we know India's growth, for instance, and we know how rapidly capital investments in renewable energy is falling. I'm sure we will be able to find when India will peak carbon emissions and when it will be able to reduce its emissions. Of course, rich countries can get more focused on reduction. Poorer countries can get more focused on production, and we need to find how money can flow from one to the other. I do not suggest that anyone talks about tax money. This is again a road that would lead us to nowhere. I've completely stopped talking about grants, concession loans, or any such thing for renewable energy. We have increased our taxes. We've introduced, the Speaker of the Parliament is here. We've introduced GST, we've introduced income tax, we've introduced business profit tax, and therefore, Son is also laughing. And therefore, we are able to fend for ourselves now. It won't be possible for any one of us to do any of these things if we have to endlessly rely upon international community or the goodwill of anyone. We have to be able to fend for ourselves. Now, that's when I start talking other things and climate change. So for me, the most important adaptation measure is democracy. And you have to have a responsive government to be able to discuss these issues and to be able to have means through your own people and through your own taxation. Now, in adaptation, most of the funding that people have been asking for is for adaptation. And I think that if we stop talking about tax money and start talking about more innovative finance and the market to do this, perhaps it might be much easier for us to go ahead and achieve this. But then, of course, there is the issue of historical justice or the issue of what has happened in the past, and it's the industrialized world who did this, and that now we want to have a better life, we can't emit carbon. So they should be paying back for what has happened to the atmosphere during the last so many centuries since the industrial world. We don't have time for all this bickering. We really don't have time. We have a window of opportunity of about 7 years, and if leaders are unable to sort it out, they should stop calling themselves leaders and get out of it. They must be able to, we must be able to find agreements and understandings. We go to Durban at the end of the year, and I don't see anything happening in Durban. I just recently had a very nice conversation and a little meeting with Mary Robinson and the team that she put together on the legality of it all. If we could take countries to court saying that they are emitting carbon. But the whole idea was to see if we can come out with a legally binding agreement through existing legal structures of countries and governments, instead of trying to see if we may be able to come up with an agreement through a convention or through a UN negotiation, which is increasingly, we are finding it to be very, very elusive. After Durban, we will probably be sitting in South Korea, and I hope that by this time we are able to come up with a legally binding agreement. I see many encouraging signs. I see that India and China are listening to everyone much, much more than they were before. And in fact, I have a feeling that they've understood the other side of the coin to say that this is an opportunity for renewable energy growth. We are now able to speak to the Indian government and the Chinese government, and I am very, very pleased that they are very receptive. They listen to you, and I think we can all talk to them. Because I am the president, I can't be talking about countries, but there are some countries that you can't talk to, and it's difficult to talk to them. Either it's because of a huge bureaucratic procedure, or people are just so stuck up. We have our carbon neutral plan, and since I met you last year, Sean has done me a little list of things that we've done since we met last year. It's, I hope you will clap. We have just published our carbon neutral, that's just publishing, writing something, so it's not really anything. Our carbon neutral electricity plan online, and we invite you to comment and suggest improvements. It contains a target to generate 60% of our electricity from solar power by 2020, and we think we can reduce electricity emission by 80% without putting people's energy bills any further up. Last month, our state electric company, the Central Electric Company, signed the first contract under the new renewable energy feed-in tariffs. It was with a Malay hotel chain that is investing in solar, in solar in order to make a good return on their investments. So we've come up with a feed-in tariff systems, and we've started taking people into the system. The Transport Ministry has announced a new import regime to ensure that in future electricity cars and everything are cheaper, petrol cars are expensive, and all renewable energy products are duty free. So you can import them as much as you want. We predict that the current set of government policies will get us about halfway to carbon neutrality. And so I am confident in the months and years ahead we can continue to introduce new policies so that we will be able to be on target and on place. I will stop and I will ask to see if you have any questions or anything that I can add to the doubts or the expectations that you have. Thank you.
Yeah, I was smirking because we have ended up paying a lot more taxes in the last year.
You were particularly unlucky, sir, no? Particularly unlucky.
Unfortunately, yeah. We have a big island, so yeah, we obviously have to pay for that. Just in terms of, you mentioned that renewables are about 30 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
Our experience is that it's actually dropped substantially. Hello? Okay. With our solar panels here, it's about 25 cents. And we just got a quote for a new set of solar panels. Oh. Thank you. We've now got a new set of solar panels, a quote, and that's half the price of our previous one. So I think we're going to end up, when we do the detailed calculations, around 15 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour for solar. So it is well below the 30 cents that you mentioned. You're doing a fantastic job on the international stage, and I think your legacy certainly will be from an international perspective as the Green President. You've already been awarded by so many publications, and your underwater cabinet meeting really was a fantastic idea in terms of positioning the Maldives. We in the tourism industry have certainly benefited from that event, and of course all your actions have been very well received on the global arena, and it is refreshing to hear a president saying that people bicker too much, and we should just get to the point, and just pointing out the fact that we need to get down to 350 parts per million, and that's the black and white of it. What are you doing locally in the Maldives to convey that green image and to get the voters, the Maldivian voters, to re-elect you because of your green stance? Because I think from an international perspective, and certainly from my perspective as a developer in the Maldives who's passionate about the environment, the concern is that you either might not get re-elected, or whoever does may not get in on a green ticket. So there may be an about change in the Maldives, and that legacy might be lost. So I really would like to understand what you're doing to really harness the voters, because when I speak to local Maldivians, I don't hear that from them. You know, they don't refer to you as the Green President. That's not the top of their mind in terms of what they're expecting from you and what they have seen from you to date.
Well, thank you, Sonu. Whoever is the president of the Maldives will always have to be mindful about the environment. Our islands are so delicate. I must confess that I didn't think that we would have to focus on the environment as much as we are doing now before we came into government. And in fact, President Gayoom did a fair amount of work on the environment and to make it aware. He was also doing as much as he can on environment issues, but why it didn't pick up at that time was because he was doing other things that people were not so happy about. So I think we will be safe in whoever who is in government, or much better, I think whoever who is in government is going to have to make environment a center stage issue, and I really have no doubt about that. And also, I can assure you, Sonu, we will win it handsomely. What are we doing? Bar Atoll is a UNESCO biosphere reserve. So like the students from Mars here, we have little projects with schools all throughout this atoll. So this is a protected atoll that would do everything according to the balances that we've agreed with the UN, with UNESCO. I think that is going to bring a new generation into thinking the importance of environment. I also feel that it's very easy for me to tell our people or talk to them or convince them about the environment. We've always lived right next to the elements. The sea is right next to you. And you are always living with the elements. And it is therefore so much simpler to understand that if you put it out of balance, something will be in the wrong. And especially after the tsunami, I've found that so many Maldivians are much, much more aware and concerned about the environment. Usually when they do something that they don't believe, when I do something that they don't believe in, they shout at me. And they make jokes out of it, and they do silly things about it. But they're not doing all these things about the work that I am doing on the environment. They're not actually, so many good jokes can really actually come out of the work that I'm doing. But they really are not doing it. Either they lack imagination. I can't say that. Shahid is here. Shahid is the Speaker of the Parliament, and he's also the one of the leaders of the opposition. I was the leader of the opposition couldn't come today because he had other he had another trip elsewhere. Of course Shahid is here. The whole idea is that we will be stable, who is in government. This is the line that we have to take. We will propose in this year's SARC summit that member countries invest 2% of their national income in renewable energy. So if we can have these in law and have these in conventions with member states agreeing on it, I think we can give sustainability and a long-term effect to the understandings and the visions and the imaginations that we have today. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Jeffrey, microphone.
Jeffrey Dean of the Daily Telegraph. Thank you, Mr. President. Most inspiring. But to get to 350, we actually have got to get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, as well as not putting more in. Do you have any thoughts or plans on how to do that in the Maldives? Are you working on sequestration anyway?
Well, actually, I've got as an advisor who first talked about sequestration, Marxian. Carbon sequestration. This was really quite new to me, even the word, what sequestration was. I was thinking of it as a sponge. But basically, how we may be able to suck carbon out of the atmosphere, and because it's already gone over 350, these will always be new challenges, and some of the fantastic, sometimes mad, ideas coming out from all sorts of places on how we may be able to pump carbon out and then trap it inside in the earth. It looks mad, but all these mad ideas usually turn around with a little change, and then it can become very good. Now, the thing to do is to plant lots of trees. And we, on the 16th of October of this month, it's the World Food Day. And we are going to count all the coconut trees of the Maldives on that day. And so we will hopefully have a better understanding. So we will measure each coconut tree. We've asked schools, students to become a guardian of a coconut tree, but we have more coconut trees than we have students. So actually we have 97,000 students, and we probably will have a lot more coconut trees than that. Planting trees and other, again, our reefs and the ocean is a very big carbon sink. But I've been told many times by scientists not to talk about that, because that's going to acidify the ocean. If we start saying that the reefs are also forests, and therefore we should be, you can have your carbon trading done through the reefs. But I've been told by Aslam, our environment minister, that not to talk about. Now we have our climate change scientists here as well. They keep telling me not to talk about that, the reef as a carbon sink, but it is a carbon sink apparently. The only thing is that it's going to acidify, and therefore it can have a big impact on the ecosystem and on the reefs. But there are algae and there are a whole lot of other things, natural ways of how we may be able to sequester or capture carbon and have it somewhere safe, then up in the atmosphere. Thank you. I think how we are going to do it, our carbon investment, our carbon neutral plan have features of carbon sequestration, renewable energy, and also efficiency of fossil fuel.
Got one more question in the back.
Mr. President, thank you, and I just want to say I don't think your comments were just positive. I think they were completely inspirational and amazing. I can't think of very many leaders of any nation around the world who are talking with such clarity and vision about.
That's why Sona thinks I won't get elected.
Actually, well, I have two questions, and the first relates to that. I'm pretty sure you're going to have a long tenure as the president here, but you're a young man, and when you're finished, would you consider coming and being president of the United States? Because we could really use your kind of clarity and honesty about these issues. So just consider that. You don't have to answer now, but just consider whether you'd like to extend your career of leadership. More seriously, yesterday we had a discussion about the way that waste treatment infrastructure interacts with water, energy, environment, and we've heard a lot from various corners about the kind of very pressing needs of better waste treatment. And I was very impressed and interested to hear your comments that you're dedicated and committed to having the Maldives as a society fund its own growth and development by boldly saying we need to raise revenue through our own tax base, and again, something I wish that in the United States we could be a little bit more forthright about. But I wondered, when it comes to the capital that's needed to develop large infrastructure networks like waste treatment, do you consider it viable to extend that principle in the sense of perhaps funding waste treatment costs through ratepayer taxes, or finding a way without having to borrow capital or loan capital or be gifted capital from outside sources? Do you consider creating specific revenue base for waste treatment to be a possible extension of that overall strategy?
Well, yes, we have to do that. Our biggest landfill dump, Tilafushi, near Male, from January 1st, we've contracted with an international firm to process the waste, and also there is a Chinese company who is going to start apparently producing some amount of electricity from the waste. Now that's our biggest waste dump, and the tax that the money that we've raised is to renewable energy, waste, health, and education. Everything else we thought can wait for a while. So we need to have this kind of singular focus on these things, and really take everything else out of balance. The manner in which we are coming out with our national budget takes these things out of balance. But we do that because we want to go into a new balance. When that happens, there'll be many people who will not be happy about it, because Of course, someone is going to lose out of this in the short term, but we are thinking of the longer term. Noon, Ra, and Badi, this atoll is Ba. We have contracted a complete waste management system for these atolls. Again, that would start from January 1st. Now, but that's from a loan from the World Bank, $17.3 million, I think, for us to set up the system. But once we set it up, again, we are going to charge the people to collect their waste. But I think that again would be cheaper, for instance, for Sonal. If government comes here to collect his waste, and if he is sure that we are going to do it properly, it might be much, much more economical for him. Waste management is very, very important for us to survive. The reefs are our first line of defense. If there are no reefs, we won't have the beaches and we won't have the islands. We won't have the reefs if we keep polluting the reefs, let alone ocean temperature rising and the corals dying. Now, that's a 100-year, 200-year process. But we can destroy a reef overnight. You can bring in a huge dredger like the one just next door and then destroy a reef. You can dump a whole lot of garbage on it and then make sure that it doesn't live anymore, and you could destroy a reef. But we've mapped all our reefs now. So there is, we now understand how many miles of reefs we have. So actually the Maldives is bigger, much bigger than the Barrier Reef, because all our islands have reef systems around it. So in terms of the length, the surface areas of the reefs, we have far more bigger surface areas. And in some of the atolls like Ba Atoll, the government has decided that from now, we've done a lot of damage in the past, that we will keep this atoll intact. And I'm so happy that we have Mao's children here who will be protecting their reefs. I am very, very clear that they understand that if they destroy their reef, it's going to affect their beach and their home. And this is so obvious to so many of us. Every island that I go, they tell me, President, this is happening to our island. But they know, the next question I ask them is, why do you think it is happening? Because then they tell me very clearly it's because they've destroyed the reef. So waste management, in answer to your question, is something that we really need doing. On the other issue of if I can take up the United States, actually I support President Obama, and I think that he will be able to win. Leaders, most political leaders will do what their people tell them to do. Others might do without being told. These kind of people can be really rather silly, those who do things without being told. But most leaders would do something when you are told to do. So the United States people, the people of the country, must galvanize their own people to political activism. They must understand this, and this cannot be just won only in university lecture halls or research centers or even international forums and symposiums. It has to be fought on the streets, and we need greater direct action on that.
Kostas, you have a question?
Great. Again, Mr. President, thank you for your incredible, inspiring words, not only for your own country, but for ours in the United States as well. Last year, I had the privilege to be here at this gathering and to spend some time with you, which resulted in a story in National Geographic Traveler magazine that generated a tremendous amount of interest among readers. We've got a ton of letters and write-ins and comments praising your leadership. And in fact, and thank you, by the way, because that story led to 2 nominations for 2 prestigious magazine awards. So National Geographic appreciates that in that way too. My question for you is this, sir. One year later, that audience, who I'm sure are going to be very interested again, what would you say in this 1 year time since we last spoke together would you feel is your most significant step forward or accomplishment towards the goals you talked about last year and continue to talk about here? What's happened in this last year with your leadership in taking this agenda forward?
Domestically, locally, I'm quite happy that we've been able to come up with our investment plan. Now, without an investment plan, it was difficult for us to start investing or go on with little projects. Now, we will be now able to break apart the investment plan into little projects, and people can take up these little projects. So we can start selling the projects, and we can start finding finance for the projects. So I think I'm really quite happy that we've been able to finally do that. Also, the feed-in tariff system, I think, would suddenly change Mali, because the state electric company is selling electricity at 40 cents a unit. Now, you can be producing electricity at home and sell to the state at 35 cents. Now, Soros says it is now possible to produce a thing with 15 cents. So this is far more a better business than a corner shop. I really think that households would find the commercial viability of it. Now, then we would want to bring in some finance through a loan to give to the households as loan, so that they can pay back from the savings that they are making. And this really is financially so viable now. If you do the sums in the Maldives, it is really quite possible. And I think we've started the system. I thank Aslam. I don't know if he's here. There he is. Aslam has done the feed-in tariff system, and we've got it working. And I think that is something that we really want to achieve. We've also been able to change our taxation system in a manner where it would give us more room for renewable energy work, especially in reducing import duties and increasing import duties as well. Internationally, I think we've been able to again start talking about a legally binding agreement, and also encourage other countries to become carbon neutral or join our club of countries trying to become carbon neutral. So basically, not a lot, is it? We've been, I think, singularly the feed-in tariff system and the investment plan, and also I feel that I've been able to convince or have some coming together of minds with Indian authorities on how they're going to plan their energy future.
We have time for one last question from in the back.
Sorry? Okay, sorry. I just want to ask you something, because I come from France, Paris, and in Europe, like 2 years ago, we talked a lot about climate change, renewables, etc. But nowadays, we don't speak about it at all. It's finished. We're only speaking of sending billions of dollars to save banks, etc. I mean, this is not on the top agenda anymore. And for Durban and Rio plus 20, I don't know what we talk about. Anyway, so is this financial crisis and the economical doldrum affecting your plans for the Maldives? And how is this could break or could break your strategy?
Well, you must understand that I'm an optimist. I think it's very good what is happening in Europe. They are finally understanding that it's going to be double-digit recessions and double-digit recessions. It's because they've reached a technological limit. They cannot expand anymore, they cannot grow anymore, there's nothing to milk out of Europe anymore. But there's so much to milk out of India and China. So I feel that Europeans now would have to come out with other technologies. They'll have to shift. They'll have to have another renaissance. And I think they're very suited to do that. They like doing that kind of thing. Their industrial revolution is over. And we will now start seeing that we are rapidly going to change our technology base. The whole essence of how we live would now have to start changing. For Europeans or any country to do that, they'll have to lose all other options. Humans, we are not so clever as to see that this has to be done now. But when all options are exhausted, the only option available will, I think, be renewable. I am convinced. So people who can embrace the future now will be the winners. And I think Germany probably therefore will maintain its cutting edge and will continue to be a winner. And I hope that good European people understand that they really need to come up with something new if they were to compete with other emerging markets. So the last 2 years has been a dip talking about renewable energy because of the recessions and because of the difficulties that you are having in Europe. But I feel that there is still an undercurrent to say that yes, we can do this, we can do your standard economics, standard monetarism, standard fiscal policy and so on, and you can turn around apparently economies. I mean, economists tell me every day that there are so many things, 50 ways to lose a lover, there's so many things to do it, so many ways to do it. And I think we will soon realize that there's no way to do it. The only way to do it is to finally change. And I hope that I have been able to say a few words that will stimulate your thinking during the next 2-3 days. And I thank you everyone for coming to the Maldives, and I particularly thank Sonu for organizing this every year. And I'm sure Sonu has excellent plans on what to do with the Eco Symposium and the future of our little discussions that we are able to have here every year. Thank you.
Thank you very much.